Take a ride with Jack, a 13-year-old boy from Virginia, who just got his braces off and usually spends Saturday morning playing basketball with his friends. But he's also a young actor, and today we hired him to help us make a point. We asked him to take a drive around town, with his mother, of course, since he's not nearly old enough to drive a car. We pass shops where he isn't old enough to work the register. Then we stop at the convenience store to see Jack try to buy beer.
Can't get it. No.
The cashier can't believe he even tried.
Literally, he looks like he's 12.
At the next store, Jack tries to buy cigarettes, with no luck.
I'm so sorry I can't send you a cigarette.
Later, he strikes out trying to buy Racy magazine.
You have to be 18 or older.
All right, okay, thank you.
And then lottery tickets.
Can I get a couple scratch-offs?
How old are you? You got your ID?
13.
You what?
I'm 13.
You can't get no scratch off, babe.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It's laughable to everyone here, the idea that we'd ever expose a 13-year-old to the dangers of a lottery ticket. But then we arrive here, at the gun show.
It should shoot pretty good for you.
I'll take it.
Within minutes, the 13-year-old easily and legally bought a .22 caliber rifle from a private seller.
How do you feel about that? Does it surprise you? Yes? No? He tries to buy beer, cigarettes, racy magazines, as they put it. What else? Lottery ticket? Well, that's dangerous. But he can walk right in and buy the gun. Some of you are parents of teenagers. Others are grandparents or uncles or aunts. Whatever your relation may be that makes what happened in Florida just too close to home and too awful to bear. Would you agree that our culture is becoming more violent? There are now 18 school shootings this year, and we're at the end of February. There's more than one mass shooting per day in our country. There's no one reason, but how does it make us feel that there's such an easy access to weapons with little or no background checks on the people who are buying them just so openly and so easily? And as in the case of Parkland, someone's son was friends with the shooter and let him move in knowing that he had a small arsenal locked away in his house. Where's the next angry young man going to come from? So during Lent, we're looking at various resolutions that went to our General Synod last summer. So this is a little how we do business. In the United Church of Christ, we are a bottom-up structure. The most important unit is the local church, to help us be autonomous and free and come to our own decisions about what the church should be. And representatives of our churches are nominated by our conferences, and we meet every 2 years to do the business of the church. And delegates are assigned resolutions to discuss and to wordsmith, and we also vote on the floor then on the resolutions, and we get to learn a little too about what are some of the newest resources to help our churches be the church we need to be at this particular time. I just finished my 2 terms as a delegate last summer in Baltimore, and today I bring a resolution called On Recognizing and Studying Gun Violence as a Public Health Emergency. It's posted on our Facebook page, but you could also go to UCC.org and find it there. So here's the summary. This resolution urges the recognition of gun violence as a public health emergency and calls on the Congress of the United States to lift its gun research restrictions on the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and by allowing research on the increasing prevalence of gun violence and death, the CDC can make recommendations regarding gun safety, training, and storage methods. And these recommendations will then lead to a reduction, we hope, in gun deaths, especially for marginalized populations. And the resolutions, of course, are backed by biblical, theological, and ethical rationale. Here's one from the Gospel of John. Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say, I am a king. But for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, which was to testify to the truth. And everyone who belongs to the truth listens to the truth, listens to my voice." And so Pilate asks him, "What is truth? What is our truth?" As followers of a truth-seeking and truth-speaking Christ, we have a responsibility to search for informed, reasoned, and rational solutions to the problems that plague our nation and our world. People of faith and goodwill cannot willingly avoid the best possible solutions when it comes to protecting ourselves and protecting our neighbors from the horrendous rates of gun violence. So here's the crux of what your larger church is trying to undo. Whereas in 1996, at the urging of the National Rifle Association, the Congress of the United States has prevented federal money from being spent on researching gun violence and has actively restricted the nation's principal public health agency, the CDC, from looking into why the U.S. has 5 times the rate of gun deaths per year than most European countries. At General Synod, our youth were the ones who led us. There was a coalition of youth who came from Chicago because, as they said, I'm 16 years old and I'm listening to my friends talk about being shot, and my older sister is 20 and she says she's lost about half her friends now. One after another in this tough south side of Chicago, these young people were coming forth and giving their testimonies of, I'm not sure I'm going to be alive to reach adulthood. And that was disheartening, to say the least. The resolution passed by 97%. But here's the thing, we have grown to be at least 2, if not more, different groups of people with opposing viewpoints, and each of us has a small t of truth, trying hard to convince the rest of us of a universal truth as being somehow obvious. And there are now, I think, 2 sides on which you can be on this issue. One is the side of a school full of teenagers and teachers in Florida and their grieving families, and the other is the side of those who, in the name of freedom, work to make semi-automatic killing machines available, period, let alone to mentally unstable people. The NRA has chosen which side it is on. Pilate meets Jesus face to face. Pilate asks him, "Are you a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, for this did I come into the world, which is to testify to the truth, and everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asks him, "What is truth?" We all have truths. Are mine the same as yours? Where does truth with a capital T reside? In the book of Genesis, God changes God's mind. After destroying most of creation in the largest mass killing of history, God feels remorse. He sets the rainbow in the sky and he makes a covenant with his people and with creation. This would never happen again. Never would such a terrible act be performed. Here in Scripture, does truth with a small t become the more universal capital T truth? Sooner or later, that which we feel to be true emerges in this story. There's a covenant between God and God's people and creation. And now is one of those times, or we will endlessly repeat a modern-day slaughter of the innocents. I read an article on the damage an AR-15 does to muscle tissue and organs by a doctor who was attending the wounded in Florida, followed by an idea that was floated last week that adept teachers could be given a bonus for carrying a concealed gun. So I just want to back out here a little bit, and I want to ask you a question. Think of a teacher you had in elementary school. Focus on one. Just focus on a teacher you had in elementary. We all remember their names, don't we? Okay, I had a few that I could use, but I have a favorite. So, Mrs. Kinsella, these big baggy dresses and this white lace thing around here, at least that's how I remember. If Mrs. Kinsella was told she had to carry a gun, she would run out of the room and down the street. I loved Mrs. Kinsella. You have a picture in your head now of your favorite teacher? Can you imagine her with a concealed gun? Can you imagine her, or him, I should say, with an AR-15? I don't want Mrs. Kinsella to have a concealed gun in her dress pocket. I want her to have a concealed check in her pocket because she's buying art supplies for her class because the schools aren't being funded. I want Mrs. Kinsella to have someone slip a check into her pocket for the school supplies that she is buying because some of her kids' families can't afford them, and there's more and more homeless families right now that she is covering. Mrs. Kinsella should receive a concealed gift card in her well-worn pocket for the $500 to $1,000 that she and teachers like her spend on their kids on average, according to a recent Time magazine article, every year just because they are dedicated teachers. I don't want a gun in Mrs. Kinsella's pocket. Do you want a gun in your teacher's? Do you want a gun in your child's teacher's pocket? And when these terrible mass shootings occur, we try to unmask, we try to debunk and expose the truth of the small t that lies within the psyche of a portion of our fellow country people's obsession with killing machines and their answer, which is that we should arm ourselves as well. And we think about how vulnerable we have become, especially our children, but also our teachers, our law enforcement, our African American men mostly, but women too. And each time there's a tragedy like this, we are told not to politicize these killings. And so we have to ask, when will it be a good time to do this? And why not now? So that cities like Irvine or Aliso Viejo or Costa Mesa or Mission Viejo, you can name the place, don't follow similarly unlikely cities of Aurora and Columbine and Minneapolis and Newtown and San Bernardino and Las Vegas and Orlando and Parkland. America, we got to turn around. We got to stop, look at what's happening to us and make the changes so that children are not harmed and that schools are safe places. And the only bad things that will happen in a movie theater is that you're going to get ripped off from some really greasy popcorn. Jesus came to testify to the truth, and we follow Jesus. And while our culture is offering us competitive versions about what the truth, including one that is firmly stating that the problem is that we don't have enough guns in our country, is that that's not going to work for us anymore. We got to have a place now. We got to have a place where we can have the opportunity to walk freely and be able to meet with our congressperson in the town square without having fear, or that we can be in a church or a temple or a mosque without fear and feel and know that we are in a safe place again. In short, that we can restore some sense of sanity in our country about what it means to move about freely, or the next generation will suffer. No, I think the next generation has already suffered the effects that we cannot yet begin to grasp from this kind of violence. Can we have conversations about gun control without being labeled or shut down? And here's the big question for us, because let's call out truth on ourselves here as well. Can we offer the same civility in return? Because I don't think we do a very good job of it. And I'll tell you one thing, I don't think I do a very good job. I'm kind of knee-jerk on this conversation, so I'm preaching a little to myself here. Can we speak also to the reality of mental illness and the lack of resources to treat that mental illness in our country? It is a mental illness problem, and that is what our resolution speaks to, the stigma that we attach to mental health issues and the extent to which our nation seems to idolize the possession of assault weapons in a gross caricature of anything the founding mothers and fathers imagined. And so today, we're going to go to a ministry fair. It looks great over there. Come on down, have some coffee, meet some ministry folks here, see what we're doing, and also meet some representatives of the Brady campaign chapter as you visit those tables. And if you're a visitor today, this is a great time to find out a little bit about what goes on at our church. But at a candlelight vigil one time, one of the folks from the Brady campaign was there with us, and I heard him say, "No snowflake ever felt responsible for the avalanche. Small voices can make big noises, and those big noises can grow into something that cannot easily be ignored." And you know, there are some teenagers right now. There's some teenagers in Florida and elsewhere today who are learning this quickly. And they are people, young people with visions that are motivated by anger and frustration at what is working to create a different paradigm for our country. They're leaving us behind because we haven't done the job. We just spin our wheels. In short, our greatest leaders and our greatest hope for the future right now are barely more than children themselves, unable to buy beer or cigarettes in a convenience store, but certainly old enough to know how to lead the rest of us in this because they're afraid to go to school. Frederick Buechner writes, "If you want to know who you are, watch your feet. Because where your feet take you, that is who you are." And Lent is a time to choose who we will be and whose we will be. Amen. Please rise now in body or in spirit and sing our closing amen.